Good evening and welcome to the sixth season of The Boiling Point. And tonight we're having our Halloween edition. We want to thank Marcus Frederiksen for his music tonight. And tonight we have a special event. We have a battle of sorts between Edmonds and Reed. And no, not this Reed, the other Reed. And we're going to discuss today, should Christians participate in Halloween festivities? So let the battle begin. You guys ready? We're going to have a spectacular time tonight. Here we go. And on one ring over here, we have Jonathan Edmonds. And on the other, we have Casey Reed. You decide. Adios.
Good evening, John.
Hey, Casey, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
That was a creative introduction, I must say.
Yes, absolutely. Mariana always does a great job. So yeah, that was another really great introduction and opening to our sixth season. This is our sixth year, Casey.
Oh wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, you guys only been on.
I don't even think a full year yet, have we? Or maybe two. Not yet. What, 2 years?
Mariana's been on the team now.
Yeah, so a little over 2 years.
Yeah, almost. Because I think I hit her up right around election time. So actually, it was right around now. Actually, so yeah, well, you're right. Probably about 2 years that you guys have been, part of the team as well. So it's pretty exciting.
Yep.
All right. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Sure. I mean, it was kind of my wife's idea, but I thought it was a good idea because we, I remember it was a year or so ago, we had like a really brief conversation, just the two of us after one of the podcasts when it was just you and I talking to each other about whether or not Christians should celebrate Halloween. Now, of course, as we know, you and I have a differing perspective on that. I do have a feeling, though, that throughout this conversation, we're going to find ourselves agreeing on a lot of points.
I think so too.
We're going to find a lot of agreement, but we do, I think, have a difference of opinion on the basic premise: should Christians actually celebrate the holiday or not? I'm in the negative, and you're in the positive.
I'm in the positive, and let me start then. Mm-hmm. I'm in the positive, but as long as people understand, like. Mm-hmm. If you're a Christian, as long as you keep that mindset that you're not celebrating any kind of evil spirits, you're not worshiping any kind of evil spirits. I like to kind of treat Halloween as a time of year where you face your fears, where you get scared, but it's about facing your fears and trying to overcome them. So that's why I think it's okay to celebrate Halloween if you're doing it in the right way, just like any celebration. If you're doing it the wrong way, if you're putting other gods or worshiping other things before God, then obviously that's not the way to go. But I like to treat Halloween as more of a face your fears kind of a holiday season than an evil, dark kind of a thing. So I think you're right. I think we are going to agree on a lot. But I do believe it's okay as long as the person and your children understand the difference. You know what I mean? I think that's really important. An important distinction.
And most of your point there, I would agree with. I do kind of go back to the old saying that you can't make chicken salad out of chicken feces. The Halloween holiday itself is inherently sinister, even in its most benign, innocent form. It is a celebration of fear. It's a celebration of death to a degree too. And of course, as we know, the scriptures say that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. And I guess if you could even call it celebration that I do at that time, it is to actually attack the premise of the holiday itself. Basically, the extent of my celebration, if you want to even call it that, is I will give the kids trick or treat candy. Because I don't want to be. It's a fun night for them to get treats, and use that for the glory of God. And what I mean is now it also depends if I'm off that night. I have a crazy work schedule, but on Halloween I've been off, or trick or treat nights I've been off. I'll usually buy these comic book tracts from Chick Publications, and that actually have the Halloween topic within their context, where it actually talks about the history of the holiday and actually attacks the premise of it, the satanic origins of it, and how it's even practiced to this day in satanic and witchcraft circles, although that's become very hush-hush over the last few decades. And of course, it presents the gospel message. And I'll give a few of these tracks along with a treat to the kids. Like and I don't want to be stingy either. I won't give them like a single little lollipop or, a couple Swedish fish. I'll give them a nice big 4-pack of peanut butter cups each, or a nice big king-size Hershey bar with a few gospel tracks along with it.
I like that idea.
Whether how their parents react when they get home, I don't know, and I don't care. They came to my house for a treat. You're going to get something from me for free. You take what you get. Beggars can't be choosers,
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like that concept, though. Maybe that's even something that maybe we'll try and do this Halloween, because I really do. I like that a lot. Because I think that just like you, you're against it, but I think that I think there's a way you can celebrate it. And I use that word a little loosely, because it's not like we're all, we decorate, and obviously my nephew goes out trick-or-treating, and I've taken him out several times, but you're never going to see me dress in you're never going to see me wearing a devil costume or presenting myself as like an evil demon or something like that. Most of the time I'll pick one of the, from the villains from the horror genre, you know what I mean? Like one of the movie villains or something like that, and dress up, or maybe just get a scary mask or something. So I also think and I wouldn't let my nephew or my kids dress up in any kind of like devil or satanic kind of costume either. You know what I mean? So there are limits to it. Like there are limits to it. You do have to draw that line, I think. Mm-hmm. But I think as long as you draw that line, then I do think it's okay, as you said, like to participate. Celebrate, again, I use that word loosely. It's not like I'm out there going, "Yeah, happy Halloween, yay!"
Right.
But I, candy, I dress up, take my nephew out, like probably the similar things that you do. And I do like your idea of like including gospel messages with like the candy and stuff. And then obviously if you're throwing in the big candy bars or like a huge pack or something, that's going to catch you some extra attention too, which I think just works great.
You see, then that's where I would kind of where I didn't go, as I wouldn't take my kids trick-or-treating now, so they didn't feel left out and they did have treats. I would also get them plenty of candy too, including the big ones for the other trick-or-treaters.
Your kids don't go trick-or-treating?
Well, definitely not now. They're 18 now, but yeah, even when they were little, I didn't take them trick-or-treating. No, I didn't do that because I want to avoid celebrating the holiday in any way that gives it any credence or credibility. If I'm going to have any kind of, again, I use the word celebrate loosely because I can't think of a better word. It's always going to be in a way of attacking what it's all about, of actually going to war against the spiritual ideology that it represents. I don't have a front yard, unfortunately, where I live. I just have a sidewalk. If I did, I'd probably get 3-dimensional figures of say Christ rising from the grave and fallen angels running from him in horror, and the
I think that would be
there on flames with his mouth wide open in agony, or something like that.
Yeah, see, and I think that is completely. I think I would be completely fine with that. If I saw that decoration in Halloween, I'd probably look at it and be like, "Wow, look at that! That's awesome!" You know what I mean? Like that. That is cool. Like that's what I mean. Like I like what you're doing, where you like you're attacking what the origins of it, the evil part of it. You know what I mean? You're turning it into something to celebrate Jesus instead of celebrating, what it's originally intended. And I like that. I like that a lot. I think that actually kind of goes to my point where it matters how you celebrate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you celebrate it in the right way or participate in the right way, then you can. But you have to be careful. It is a fine line there. You do have to be careful, especially when kids are involved. Right now, did you let your kids go trick or treating when they got older? You said you just didn't take them trick or treating, but once they got older,
I understand that last year. Now, I didn't get them anything for it. They did it on their own, but they decided to go out when they were 17 with one of their other 17-year-old friends. Again, I'm not, approving of it per se, but I'm not going to outright forbid it. At that point, I'm not going to try to hold a 17-year-old. No, you're not going, whatever. I mean, they wanted to get some candy. That was their choice. At a certain point, you got to let go. They got to cut the apron strings. So yeah, they did. Now this year, I don't know if they plan on doing that or not. Like I said, they're actually legal adults now.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah, well. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and I don't like the age thing. I think, you know what, there's other things kids could be doing than trick-or-treating on Halloween night. So, you know what, I mean, if I see older kids come up to our door, and I try real hard, because at first I was like, I used to look at them and be like, hey, you're too old to trick-or-treat. But really, wouldn't you, I mean, it would be better for them to be trick-or-treating than doing whatever else they might be doing.
Yeah.
So I also kind of look at it that way. I mean, obviously, if a 21-year-old came up to my door, I'd probably be like, dude, but I think there's a little wiggle room in the 17, 18 kind of area there. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think even if I celebrated, that's too old to be going out, but everybody that's their.
I'm pretty sure I stopped at 16.
16, yeah.
I stopped at 16, I believe, and I took my younger brother. Like it was the first year that he was allowed. Like I was allowed to like take him with me. So I think that's why I did it that year. Was because he could go with me finally. So we went and did this whole neighborhood, the whole neighborhood that I currently live in, actually, many years ago, because I have family that also live in this neighborhood, and we wanted to do every house we possibly could. So. That was the last year that I ended up going.
I know that is particularly innocent. Of course, you'd much rather have kids doing that than going out and destroying property or starting fires and committing crimes against, especially in the name of Halloween. Of course, that's infinitely better. But I go back to what it all actually represents. Trick or treat comes from the Druidic tradition of where it was originally was, I think it was a potato they used instead of a pumpkin, but they would carve a face in it, and it was the mark of a damned soul that they would leave on the door of a house that refused to give them the treat. Of course, at that time, the treat was someone from the household to be given over for human sacrifice, usually a virgin daughter. And these are the origins of this practice. And then, of course, in the Druids, it was Samhain, the Druidic New Year. But various pagan cultures and witchcraft traditions have very similar backgrounds where this trick or treat actually comes from. And even though today's version is innocent, I don't like to give it any credence. That's why I wouldn't go out and trick or treat myself or take kids out trick or treating, but I'll let them come to my door. And in a symbolic gesture, what I'm doing is not only trying to get them saved by giving them the gospel, but it's also, here's the infinitely more powerful and holy spiritual force that overcomes yours. It overcomes any trick you would want to do. That's the symbolism in that as well. Am I making sense?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I do understand that. And I think it's good that you especially for the kids, you're not trying to be, a neighborhood groucher or anything like that. So you put your own spin on it. And I think that's pretty cool. So
we know the Satanists certainly do garbage like that in reverse with good holidays like Christmas. We know that in the West Shore School Board, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they used to, the Satan Club in their bakery, they would make little cookies with pentagrams and Baphomet heads and everything else. And they would take it to the so-called holiday party. They don't even call it a Christmas party anymore. But that's how they would celebrate Christmas, by passing out little Satan cookies to the kids in elementary school. And one of the guys walking around with a hat that said, "Hail Satan." I mean, are you ever loving kidding me? And that was in a public school with tax dollars, where that's funded by the tax dollars. So it's insane. Now, I remember they came to one of the school board meetings with those cookies. And in the same spirit of why I won't celebrate Halloween, they were passing out these cookies to people, and I refused.
Yeah.
And I said, and it was funny, the Satan girl, she's like, "Oh, don't be afraid, it's just sugar and flour." I said, "It's nothing to fear here. So what's inside of me is infinitely more powerful than your entire realm." I said, "It has nothing to do with fear. It's about not dignifying evil with my participation."
Yeah. It's not even, exactly. It's just not even dignifying it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I came across something like that, like if I come across something that's clearly, satanic or demonic or anything, obviously I would, refute it right away. But I mean, and honestly, there's really, at least in the last couple of years, I've noticed too that the kind of scary or that kind of style of costume really doesn't seem to be the style anymore. It doesn't seem to be at the forefront, at least for me. I mean, I don't know what you've seen in your neighborhood, of course, but for me, kids are dressing up more as superheroes, Disney stuff. That's what I see from kids. And then, the adults, or not adults, but the teenagers and stuff usually are a little less, more like just a mask and throwing a sheet over themselves, a little more lazy, I guess is the word I would be looking for, as the older they get. Of course, you always get a few, but yeah, for the most part, I would have to say like that kind of evil or demonic Satanism symbology, I have not seen in the last couple of years, at least around this neighborhood. A little bit maybe, but not.
In our neighborhood, we've actually had a decrease in recent years of trick-or-treaters altogether, because I live in the downtown area of New Cumberland, and up in the other end of the town, around 16th Street, there's a whole block that has major like hot dog cookouts and everything every year now. So everybody goes to that end of town. So we get maybe half the trick-or-treaters we used to get years ago. Now, but going back to that, and I go back to verses like, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and a power and a sound mind. And where it says to not, how does that verse go? Have no fellowship with the works of darkness, but rather reprove them. And that's why I believe in any way of addressing the holiday, it should always be in an attack mode against what it represents, making war against the spiritual forces, literally and figuratively. Just going back to the, satanic cookie thing, I won't grace evil with my participation. And it's funny because later on, one of the Satanist girls that make these cookies actually bragged online they put curses on these cookies before they give them to people. And I know a lot of people who ate them did get very sick afterwards. And now also there, as far as that goes, going beyond anything spiritual, I wouldn't accept anything from them anyway, because you don't know what else is in it. Hey, here's a cookie just for you. Enjoy your arsenic. Enjoy your
that really? Yeah, isn't that kind of terrible too, though, that our society has kind of devolved into that you really, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, parents were already having to check candy. My parents had to check candy. Now they also stole candy, and so they definitely use it as a pretext to be able to sort through our candy and then take what they wanted. but of course they were also making sure nothing was opened or tampered with, and that's even when I was a kid. So I can't even imagine now, like anything Liam, like my nephew gets, we also check and make sure it's not opened.
And there are actual satanic cults that do things like that as a way of shedding blood on Halloween. I mean, and there's been a lot of former Satanists that have admitted to that, like putting a pin in an apple or something by cutting the mouth and bleeding as a way of shedding blood. And now I can see if any Satanists are watching this. Well, that's not true. We don't do that. Yes, a lot of you do, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you want to admit that others do it or not. And you're always going to find, whenever you're talking about these topics, it's funny, people who practice those kind of arts will always have objections. Now, sometimes they're just flat out lying. They do the things you're talking about and just deny them. Other times, it's just like with Christianity, you have many different denominations of Satanism. I mean, there's the Satanic Temple, there's the Church of Set, there's the Church of Satan. There's all these different, some of them are self-professed atheists, even though that's kind of an oxymoron, because you spend your entire life fighting against a God that you don't believe exists. I know that, for example, what's his name in the Marvel movies, the King villain, the big purple guy. What's his name again?
Thor, or not Thor. That's the god of lightning. You're talking about Thanos.
Thanos, yeah. I know that Thanos doesn't exist, so I don't, spend my whole life trying to prepare for war against Thanos. All these atheists, who don't believe in God are always going against God and everything he stands for. So, yeah, I don't even believe in the whole atheism thing anyway. But I even heard somebody make an ironic statement that says that God doesn't believe in atheists. I saw someone with a shirt one time that said, God is dead, Nietzsche, and it said Nietzsche is dead, God. So, but the Satanists there are different forms, and while some will admit to serving forces of evil, other ones will just admit to serving their own personal desires. But now, in the end, they all have the same end goals, and that is the complete eradication of anything that smacks of normalcy or natural beauty or goodness or holiness. But they will claim different aspects of what they actually believe in that realm. Go ahead. I got off on a little bit of a
absolutely. The only thing I was going to say was that Pastor Gavin and I had talked about one of the points, and now I just lost what point it was there. So I apologize.
No problem.
Yeah. So, but I agree with you about the like the forces of evil, and they also do seem to come around in Halloween. So I definitely am not disagreeing with anything you're saying about like Halloween having evil origins and stuff like that. I kind of, and it's different from what you're doing, right? Like you're kind of actively fighting against it in a way, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to like just change it, like just not like I can still be a Christian and dress up in a scary costume and not be affected by any of that. Because once you would probably agree with this, once you've accepted Jesus Christ, it's unless you accept these things, unless you invite these things in, then you're going to be protected from them.
I do agree with that, but you're also giving it legitimacy, and that's where we would kind of have a difference of opinion. I don't believe in giving any kind of credence to it as something that's legitimate that should be even looked at in a positive manner. Like I said earlier with the example of you can't make chicken salad out of chicken feces. You can't take something inherently evil and sanitize it. And that's my perspective on it. Because I would go ahead.
If I could argue, it's okay. I want to push back on that point just a little bit right there. Because I mean, we celebrate Christmas, in December. We know that Jesus wasn't actually born in December. Okay. It was chosen. And we've covered this in episodes with Pastor Gavin. Go check them out on our channel on Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook. Little plug there, Casey. It kind of commandeered the winter solstice from the pagans, right?
So I mean, in fact, it's interesting because the original New Testament church didn't really have any holidays. They had, I think it was one day in the spring, like when would be our month of May, where they had a memorial for those who were martyred for the faith. But that was it. The only feasts or festivals or anything they celebrated were basically, as far as what was supposed to be of Christian origin, were the ones that they celebrated from the Old Testament, like what we would now call a Messianic Jew. Because the earliest Christian leaders the New Testament leaders were Jews. So some of them did celebrate the Old Testament festivals, others didn't. And when it became an argument and a controversy, but the Apostle Paul, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in the book of Romans, basically in a nutshell, it's a whole chapter on it, but says it's irrelevant. Stop fighting about it. You can celebrate it or you cannot. It's not a commandment of God, but they are fun things to remember. Now, as far as those other holidays you mentioned, like Christmas is a good example, also Easter. All of these holidays do have pagan origins. The Easter, of course, was the celebration of the Greek fertility goddess Ishtar, who was later on in the Roman version, the goddess Diana, who was surrounded with eggs, which is where the egg comes from. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail right now. But
it's okay. And you're pretty much talking about exactly what Pastor Gavin talked about.
And Christmas, of course, December the 25th was the birth of Saturnalia, the Roman god. And of course, in other versions of this god, like Osiris in Egypt, Tammuz and Babylon and so forth.
And it also took place, and these celebrations also took place right around or over the winter solstice.
Right, exactly. Now, here's where I would say there is a distinction between those holidays and Halloween. When we celebrate Christmas, we're not celebrating any of those things. We're celebrating exclusively the birth of Christ. And when we celebrate Easter, we are celebrating exclusively the resurrection of Christ. So whatever those dates may have been used for the holidays that we celebrate have no sinister connection. Even in those pagan origins, ironically enough, these holidays of Christmas and Easter, what was now called Christmas and Easter, even they were celebrations of life, celebrations of birth or rebirth, of resurrection, and even in the most cynical cases of reincarnation, but they were celebrations of life, and their histories are also those of joyous occasions, where Halloween in every version of it in the ancient world was always about death, was always about torture, was always about doing the most evil things to appease the gods or the goddesses. And there's no way of sanitizing that. Like, you look at Christmas holiday, look how many beautiful gospel hymns come out of the Christmas tradition. Look how many beautiful gospel hymns come out of the Easter tradition. So many incredible, spiritual blessings and power that come from those holidays. You don't find that in Halloween. You're not going to find one Christ honoring or God glorifying song coming out of Halloween. You're not going to find anything that promotes anything overtly spiritual in a holy sense out of that holiday. And that's where I think the difference lies. I mean, because as far as a date's origins and what it was used for, that's symbolism, where what you're actually celebrating is the substance. And I can't think of anything about the Halloween holiday that is inherently holy, at least not in the good sense. I mean, holy means separated, and the word holiday ironically literally means holy day. So if you're celebrating a consecrated, separated holiday, what are you celebrating if you're celebrating Halloween? You're celebrating something consecrated to spiritual forces, but it's not the Holy Ghost. It's not the Lord Jesus Christ. It's quite the opposite. And that's where I would say there's a huge distinction between the Halloween and those other holidays, which we, I would say, in a good way, we stole them from the pagans. Let's keep them, because we took them and we used them for celebrating something righteous and what's the word I'm looking for? Edifying, as opposed to something evil and destructive.
Well, the only rebuttal that I have at this point is that I'm going to work on some way to turn Halloween into something we can celebrate as Christians. I'll figure it out, Casey. Give me some time. That's what I'm going to work on now. So you've at least inspired me to try and see if we can do something about that. You made a valid argument. I have nothing to do that. I have nothing to counteract that. Every part of Halloween's origin, centers around death and other stuff like that, evil nonsense like that. So I'm going to, but you did say, because we stole these other holidays, stole them. We commandeered these other holidays.
We claimed them. Yeah, we claimed them.
So I think I'm going to figure out a way for us to claim Halloween. I'm going to figure that out, Casey. I don't have anything right now. I'll come back to you, and I'll let you know what I come up with.
And what's ironic about the other holidays too, about like Christmas and Easter and even Halloween for that matter, is that the Roman Catholic Church was the one that instituted all of these. And I'm not sure exactly what year they were all instituted, but I know it was at least a century or more after the Catholic Church came into existence, which wasn't even created until 326 AD. So you figure it was probably close to the first 500 years of the New Testament era. There were no Christian holidays, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it was a bad thing that we got them. I'm just saying that, it was never obviously necessary for our spiritual edification. Again, I'm all for Christmas and Easter and these other holidays. And it's ironic because I do know Christians, some, and I disagree with them, obviously, but I do know some Christians who won't celebrate Christmas or Easter because
Me
of
too.
its pagan history. You know?
Yeah,
So,
I've had non-Christians try and throw that at me. Oh, you're celebrating the pagan holiday because you bring a tree into your house. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works. I don't worship a god. I'm not worshiping a different god because I happen to bring a tree into my home. That's not how it works.
Well,
So
who's
that's
the
really
creator of the trees is the God we serve. Not to
exactly.
mention that the most of our traditions that we use a Christmas tree for did not come from pagan traditions. Like it was interesting. I wish I could remember the pastor's name. I wish I could remember most of what he said. It was an incredible presentation years ago, and I can't do it justice. I forget most of what he talked about. But what we do in our culture, like the wrapping around of the ribbon, that represented the serpent, tempting Eve, and then the fruit. There's a whole gospel message within the way we decorate our trees.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to try to explain it because I'm going to butcher it because I can't
Yeah, we'll have
remember
to look
most
that
of it.
up.
But
Yeah,
like the candle was the light of Christ, which because that's what they usually used to put on instead of light bulbs like we do.
Yeah.
But all the symbolism around the Christmas tree, the way we practice it, did not come from the pagan tradition. It was created by Lutheran ministers after the Protestant Reformation in Germany. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as in the episode, Pastor Gavin goes into a big long thing too, and I'm not going to spoil it. Go look at that episode. But he kind of boils it down to are we bowing down to the tree? Are we worshiping these other gods? That's what it's about. If we're not doing that, then we're not sinning. We're not turning our backs to God or anything like that. We're celebrating Him. So. And yeah, you're probably right. That's probably why they didn't want holidays at all with Christians, because then they could be misconstrued and changed and altered and stuff and corrupted, if you will. As Christmas, as at least in America, is definitely far more commercialized.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Than it was. And let's go back to Halloween now. We're not talking about Christmas. We're supposed to be talking about Halloween.
Sorry, we got
our viewers know how the Boiling Point podcast is. We go off on tangents frequently, so it happens. But it's also commercialized like that. I went to look. I was just getting some candy for me and my family here at the house, right? Not even for trick or treating or anything, just to have some candy, And I was looking at the Halloween candy, and I'm like, holy cow. Like, you're going to spend $40-$50 to give 30 kids candy. You know what I mean? Like, that's just ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's not cheap. That's for sure.
No. And that's how, just like, Christmas. I mean, even Easter, the Easter bunny is kind of, they're trying to make it more about the Easter bunny even more than about Christ. So, it is starting to happen to some of the holidays as they get more commercialized. And Halloween is no different. But yeah, so I'm going to work on that, Casey, though. I'm going to work on that. We're going to figure out a way to turn it into a Christian holiday. We will do it together. I'll get you on board. Trust me.
I have no ideas for that. So you're my hero if you can come up with them.
Oh yeah, I'm going to come up with something. And we're gonna change the whole way America celebrates Halloween. So just you can take that to the bank. Just give me a little time on that. Give me a couple weeks to try and think about something. Because it's definitely a tall order, but I'm gonna figure it out. So is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up? I think that's good.
Not directly to the topic, but something that kind of spills over, because I just want to set the record straight on this, because it's a common misconception, especially among young people, because we were talking about the origin of some of those other holidays, how they're pagan origins, and you'll see these ridiculous bumper stickers like from Wiccans, "My goddess gave birth to your god." Let's make something very clear. Now, you know this, but a lot of people, young people especially, don't know this because they're taught a lot of nonsense. And unfortunately, the churches are kind of dropping the ball on this. The Lord Jesus Christ was never a pagan god and never came from any of those origins. You can, if you look long and hard enough, like they do, you'll be able to find one or two similarities here or there. But just like there's billions of people in the world today, somewhere in this earth, you have people that have a similar life to yours. It doesn't mean it's the same life. You know,
it also doesn't mean that they believe the same thing that you believe.
You know, and how many generals became and military leaders became kings or emperors. That doesn't mean George Washington is a copy of the Roman Emperor Titus. You know, I mean, it's not the same thing. But here's the thing too. All the pagan gods were continually died and were reborn. Jesus was never reborn. He was only born once, and he resurrected from the dead and never died again. You know, and so there is absolutely no connection whatsoever to the Lord Jesus Christ and these pagan gods who are constantly experiencing death over and over and over again, or coming from a mother goddess. The Lord Jesus Christ always existed throughout all eternity. You know, the God, he is part of the Holy Trinity. He not coming from a mother goddess, and that veneration of Mary, of course, is something else that was a result of Romanism, which again did not exist for nearly 300 years after Christ's time on earth. So I just wanted to throw that little tidbit out there because it's such a common misconception in our day and age, especially among young people, to think that Christianity itself has pagan origins. It most certainly does not. At no point did any of the truth of the gospel borrow anything from any pagan legends. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recommend the episode. I don't remember exactly what number it is off the top of my head, but if you check our video library, Pastor Gavin and I do an episode on the differences between biblical Christianity, Roman Catholicism, and Judaism. So check that episode out, because we also track the origins of all three of those, and we even throw in a little bit of the Quran, and the Muslim faith gets thrown into that origin talk as well.
Check that out.
Yeah, I'll send you a link once we wrap this episode up once we wrap this episode up. I'll send you a link to that episode once we wrap this episode up.
I definitely look forward to that, because I know it's a lot of Christians, especially, really don't know what Judaism is. You know, a lot of us, and I was like this till probably maybe 12 years ago, and I'm in my 50s. We think that Judaism is just the Old Testament. It's not. Most Jews, most of them put much more credence to the Kabbalah and the Talmud than they do to the Old Testament. Even Orthodox Jews revere the Talmud more than the Old Testament. And we were talking about Roman. What's that?
I was just going to say, one of the biggest things that we discussed that is the difference between Judaism and biblical Christianity is that Jewish people don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah, or non-Messianic Jews don't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. But otherwise, we do believe in the same thing. That's the biggest difference between the Jewish people and us. I mean, there's other ones, of course.
That is definitely the most prime difference. But most Jews, I mean, do not even believe in the Old Testament anymore. I mean, they are overall, as far as ethnicities in the world, the most atheistic of all ethnicities. You know, now that doesn't mean all of them are, of course. There's always millions of exceptions to the rule. But overall, they have the highest percentage of atheists of any ethnicity on the planet. You know, so very few of them even believe in the religion of Judaism, and those who are
that's true.
Jews, you know, not only do they reject the New Testament and the Gospel, that most of them actually even reject pretty much most of the Old Testament, because they put more stock in the Talmud and the Kabbalah, which have a very contrary view than the Bible does. I mean, like the Kabbalah is almost pure witchcraft. It's all full of mostly Babylonian mysticism, and the Talmud, which is supposedly the sayings of the rabbis, you know, it has all kinds of ideas and doctrines that are grotesquely in opposition to what even the Old Testament teaches. I know it's funny, is even in the time of Jesus, some of the myths that are in the Talmud were already oral tradition at that time. Like, you look in the Old Testament, you don't find Pharisees or Sadducees or Sanhedrin, any of that stuff. You just find the temple priests, the Levitical priesthood. And it's funny, like I heard one pastor explaining how when they took the woman who was caught in adultery before Jesus, there's a lot more to that story. Now, the Bible's not wrong. The Bible's 100% correct. But it doesn't go into a lot of details that are very interesting on that, because, see, what's now in the Talmud, and was even the sayings of the rabbis at the time, they reiterated the stoning to death, the death penalty for the adulterous woman, but conveniently left the man out. Did you ever wonder? They said, because they brought this woman before Jesus, and they said she was caught in the act of adultery. Did you ever wonder where the guy was? Because in the Old Testament, they're both supposed to be stoned to death, not just the woman. Now, tradition has it from some historians who lived in the first century that when Jesus wrote the name in the ground, that was a practice that some of the because the Jews have been under captivity under different empires, the Persians, the Babylonians, and I believe it was the Persian Empire that had a tradition where they would write the name of a crime before somebody before they had stoned them to death, or what the name of their accomplice was. And even in the movie The Passion of the Christ, now the Bible doesn't say what the thieves and the crosses stole, but they had a little cup, golden cup that the thief had nailed next to him in the cross. That was something the Romans actually did. They would point the crime out or what the person did or their accomplice in writing, just like they put King of the Jews above the cross of Jesus. Well, some historians from that time said, even though it's not in the Bible, that when Jesus wrote in the ground, he wrote the name of the man she committed adultery with, and it was one of the guys standing there holding the stone. So the whole thing was a setup. because he noticed when he said, he who was without sin cast the first stone, no argument. They didn't say a word. They dropped their stones and walked away. Because he basically said, I know who you are, I know what you did. And one of the guys standing there holding the stone was the guy they caught her with. Yeah. And I'm not sure why I got off on that rabbit trail, but I'm not sure what my main point was anymore. But we were talking about the differences between Judaism and Christianity and Roman Catholicism. You gotta excuse me, I'm very ADHD. But Roman Catholicism was, practice, of course, it was created by the Roman Emperor Constantine, and he wanted to basically merge Christianity and paganism under one religion. I mean, the word Catholic literally means universal. So the Roman Catholic is the Roman universal religion. And he basically took all the gods and goddesses of the Romans and Greeks and turned them into the saints, And then that's another whole, can of worms.
Again, that's what we talk about that in the episode. And that's the biggest thing that we discussed really in that episode is that Roman Catholicism is really the furthest from everything, like out of the four. Like it's supposed to be just the three, but then, like as I said, we talk a little bit about the Quran and the Muslim faith as well in that episode, just a little bit. But really, you can track the origins of all three of those religions to the same place, to the same stories, the same scriptures. Jesus is real. You can't deny that. Even the Quran recognizes it. So. But Roman Catholicism is almost like a pollution of it, where they have saints, where you're supposed to worship saints, and there's works. Some of that stuff is in direct opposition to what is in the Bible, which they also claim to believe. So it's really weird.
Yeah, because it comes out of pagan tradition, not out of scriptures.
Exactly.
It's interesting. In the late 1800s, Reverend by the name of Alexander Hislop wrote a book called The Two Babylons. And that book is pretty incredible. And it really, long story short, because it's, almost 1,000 pages long, it traces the history of Babylon, not just through scripture, but through archaeological discovery, in the most ancient texts found around the world. It goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel with Semiramis and Nimrod. Semiramis was both the wife and the mother, which is pretty gross, of Nimrod, who was the one who constructed the Tower of Babel. And when he was killed for his crimes by which was led by one of the sons of Noah, who was his great uncle, Shem. Was one of Noah's sons, was the great uncle Nimrod, actually had him killed for the murderous practices he was doing in his religion. And then Semiramis was pregnant with his child at the time he was killed. And when she gave birth to him, claimed that it was Nimrod reborn. And she named the baby Tammuz. So that mother-child cult, the mother goddess and the god child, comes from ancient Babel, and which was, of course, later on embracing the Babylonian Empire. And then that same mother-child cult spread through all the ancient religions, with Osiris and Isis in Egypt, with Aphrodites and Cupid in Greece. I think it was Jupiter and Venus in Rome. That they all had that same a tradition with different names, and that's where Roman Catholicism got that image with their version of Mary and Jesus, because in the scriptures Mary is not venerated at all. She's in no way deified. She's just a woman who was a woman of good repute, but she was a sinner like anyone else who needed a salvation through her son Christ, like we did, and he existed eternally before he was ever born from her, unlike the God of pagan traditions where the mother goddess is eternal and the God child comes from her, so there is that distinction,
and that's an important one. That's an important distinction there. That God existed and that Jesus is just the human form of God. Mary was just the vessel. She was a good person, but she was just the vessel. God chose her to be the mother, of Jesus. But that is an important distinction there because we don't believe that Mary is a deity. She's not a goddess. She doesn't sit alongside Christ and God in the Holy Trinity. She doesn't have that kind of rank. So that's like one of the biggest things that we had discussed in that episode.
Yeah, I want to see that video. I'll be interested to check that out. So I know Pastor Gavin is very knowledgeable and is a great teacher. I really enjoyed a lot of his messages too when I would go to his church. So
and that's one of our best episodes. It's one of our highest viewed episodes. Also, is that one. So I will get you a link as soon as we wrap up. Anything else you want to discuss, or are you? I think we're ready.
No, I gotta stop going down rabbit trails. I'm gonna stop now.
Yeah, all right. Is Mariana gonna take us out, or should I just take us out?
Oh, sure. You want to take us out, Mariana? Oh, she says for you to take us out.
All right. Well, then, thank you for tuning into this episode and our little debate between me and Casey about Halloween and whether or not you can practice it or celebrate it, participate. We definitely have differing opinions on the actual holiday, but we both, believe in the same things. So,
amen.
As I said before, Casey made very, very good arguments and made very, very good points. So my goal is going to be to try and figure out a way for us to co-opt it and take it back.
And I'll freely admit that I know I'm in the minority on this position. I know you hold the majority view. So.
Yeah, or it's not that I totally disagree with you. I just think that as long as I think it's an individual decision, right? Like that's what I ultimately think it comes down to. If you think that you can participate in it without being corrupted by it, then I don't see that as a problem. That's my position. If you don't think you can be a part of it, because, some people have history with stuff and maybe you don't want to be a part of it, or you just choose to, like Casey, I don't have a problem with that either. It's not like I'm offended because you choose not to celebrate Halloween. It's not any skin off my back at all. So, but I am going to look for a way for us to take it over, for us to co-opt it and make it ours, Casey. So I'll work on that. And then once I have you convinced, we'll start working on that. Maybe for next Halloween. Look for that next Halloween. Maybe I'll set that as the goal. Give me a year to try and figure it out.
Sure, sounds good.
All right. Make sure
God bless and enjoyable.
Yeah. Make sure you check out Casey when he does his episodes. It's the red pill, the daily dose of the red pill.
Red pill therapy, dose of reality.
That's it. I'm sorry. I
have a crazy work schedule, but every now and then I'll get on there and have a few.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah,
the last one I did, you had to put a disclaimer on it because I had to get a little graphic.
Yes, I did have to do that, and that was for our protection. Obviously. So I didn't have a problem with it. I just had to make sure that the people watching understood what was going to happen.
Now, for full disclosure purposes, I did want to wash my own mouth out with soap after I was done with that. but we're in a precarious position when we're dealing with this garbage in the school libraries. I mean, in order to adequately address it, you can't help but to get very vulgar because that's what we're discussing.
Well, I can just listen, Casey.
Reference it without really getting into detail of how bad things really are. No one really understands the full impact of what we're dealing with.
Yeah,
so
well, let me just
catch 22.
Let me tell you that and this is not about this is a little off topic here, but with your release and what we've been doing with exposing the bribery and some of the other stuff in the school districts, dude, we have the demons running and doing jumping jacks and leaping tall buildings in a single bound because they're out and they're everywhere. Since you released that, the Boiling Point podcast is getting hammered since we started doing the whole school district thing and doing all that. We've been getting hammered, and now, if that's not enough, now they're attacking the sister show, Mayhem Media, because I run that brand. So now what I say on the Boiling Point podcast is directly affecting that brand. So the demons are working overtime to try and shut us down and quiet us down right now. So we're not going to stop, obviously, but we have them in a frenzy right now, Casey. So just to let you know what happened since you released that, you woke somebody up. Somebody woke up and woke up other people, and there are some evil forces unhappy in the general vicinity of us. Luckily, we're protected, so we don't have to worry about that. But they have begun their attacks, but they won't succeed, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, what I did want to say, since you did that, because I don't think you were aware of, I've been taking flack on both brands now since we've been releasing some of that. It's not all you, me and Mariana, releasing the whole stuff about the bribery and stuff. We got people up in arms right now. So, and make sure you go check out Mariana and her show, The Watchdog Report. And then she does Simply Speaking with Christy. And then, of course, she comes on Boiling Point podcast episodes as well. So make sure you check out all of our content. Now that we're back from the summer vacation, I'll be producing more episodes, and likely Mariana will be helping me, and we'll be getting some content put out. So make sure you stay tuned for all that. And I'll also share out the episodes that we talked about tonight on our social media, on Facebook and on Twitter. So, and of course, you can follow our channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. And of course, all of our episodes in their entirety are only found on Rumble, because sometimes episodes get removed from YouTube and Facebook. So Rumble is the only place you can find out all of our episodes. Marcus Frederiksen played us in. He's going to play us out. Check him out, reverbnation.com/Marcus Frederiksen. Share out your favorite song. And Casey, thanks for joining me for this very excellent episode. And unlike normally how I sign off, where I tell you that this is the end, I'm going to start amending that. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. Until next time.
God bless.